What's poppin', mi gente? It's your boy back with another video. Now, this particular Let's Talk About It is something that was requested by a loyal Patreon subscriber, so I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to cover two topics here, with the first one being how stages are going to work in the Castlevania Symphony of the Night Hacked engine, as well as how the player's physics and controls now somewhat differ from the original game. And it's going to lean more towards the physics section, as the controls haven't been completely finalized yet. And by haven't been finalized, I mean there's a lot of different ways I can approach the setups for the actual attacks. Case in point is at the moment I have it set up so that you have one button for your weak attacks, one button for your strong attacks, and for those who don't know, weak attacks would be just your basic attacks, like the basic slashes with your sword, crouching and slashing, jumping and slashing, of course the chains associated with doing multiple slashes in the air or ground, and the strong button for the sword, standing up or jumping, would be the chopping move, and ducking would be the launcher. But I'm thinking of changing this. I still have sub-weapon set up to be up and attack, but I'm thinking it might be a better idea to instead have button 1 be weapon set 1, button 2 be weapon set 2, have a shoulder button be used for a sub-weapon, and then maybe have used up and attack for things like the chopping attack, and the launcher could then be something simple like double tapping down a hitting attack, something like that can come out really quickly and be used whenever you want it. That's what I mean when I say the buttons haven't been finalized. The actual coding for it was done for some time now, actually. It's been done, I think, for about a good year and a half, so I'm not planning on changing the code itself. It's just tweaking a couple of settings. And again, I'm doing this because I'm thinking about making the gameplay very fast-paced, make it so you can access anything you want to access on the fly, and make it so no matter what's coming at you, the issue isn't, oh, I couldn't get that button motion out in time. No, the issue is you didn't react quick enough, your reflexes suck, you need to get good, scrub. I want to make the gameplay very exciting and quickly paced, and I can't do that if the controls are lacking and you have to do stuff like Hadouken motions and Dragon Punch motions and half circles. Those are ripped out of the game long ago and they're not coming back. They're just annoying as hell and they don't belong in a platformer. This is not Street Fighter versus Marvel versus SNK versus Tatsunoko versus God knows what other party company wants to jump into this mix and decide to make this Super Smash Bros. Melee number 1,763,000, etc., etc. This is Castlevania, motherfuckers, and I want the controls to feel like it. I want it to feel like it was made for a 2D platformer, and you guys have to rely on the reflexes and practicing this game to be able to whoop motherfuckers' asses and blow through this game like a master should. So let's go ahead and get started. First up, stages. Now, I've mentioned in the past on a number of occasions that while I like the open-ended Metroidvania type of stages the Symphony of the Night originally had, and then followed up with Circle of the Moon, and Harmony of Dissonance, and Araya of Sorrow, and Dawn of Sorrow. You're all getting the idea by now. This was 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago they came out with this. I mean, the formula's gotten a bit tired and outdated now. While I like the ability to explore the world openly, I also understand there's a lot of limitations on it. First and foremost is the lack of any kind of ranking/scoring system. You just really can't set one up because the player can go in any direction for any amount of time. And yes, you could set it so there are intervals, like at certain points between 2 points when you start, that's when the scoring ends, but how do you come back later and improve that score? Well, you really can't. I mean, there's no really good way to really go, okay, let's set up points, checkpoints, where now if you want to go back and try your score again, you can, because the player could have gone in an innumerable number of directions first, done an innumerable number of things, collected an innumerable number of items. There's no way to put any kind of limitations in place where it's like, okay, well, I didn't do good on the stage 1 score, let me just come back at the end of the game with my stats all maxed out and all this armor and all these abilities, and I'll literally clear the stage with the best score possible. It completely defeats the purpose of putting any serious skill into playing a stage early on in the game. And that's something I wanted to eliminate. I wanted you to actually have a scoring system in the game similar to the old Castlevanias, but I also didn't like how limiting those games were. I didn't like the fact that once you cleared a stage, that was it. There was no going back to it until you started a new game. In a game of this length that's not just going to be a simple 1 hour long romp through the castle, it needs to be a little more open. But at the same time, there do need to be limitations on it, just so you can't kind of blast through the game. And you guys see the results here, because if you play the original Symphony of the Night, the first castle, there are a lot of limitations in place at first that really pretty much keep you on a single course. It's very linear. And then the castle opens up a little bit, and it's like, okay, well, it's still pretty linear here. It's not set up in a way where you can become overpowered and just blast through. There's still going to be a challenge through most of the stuff you run into. That does start to taper off a little bit towards the end of the castle because of the way they did leveling. So there's some flaws there as well. But there's a huge difference between that and the second castle, where immediately when you come out of the reverse keep, you can go to your right to the Darkwing Bat, or to your left to fight Medusa, where there are significantly higher level enemies. And yes, they do more damage. And yes, I feel that area is a little harder, but it's nothing you can't overcome even first starting off. And if you go that left route first, you're going to get extremely overpowered. You're going to have levels coming in left and right, one after another, and it's ridiculous how strong you get. Not to mention the equipment you get. You could literally go through Medusa's area and then backtrack through the Darkwing Bat's area, and you notice the difference very quickly. Like, the challenge is pretty much gone. I didn't like that fact. I also didn't like the fact that there was no way to just basically rank how you were doing it skill-wise in each playthrough. I think a scoring system adds a little more depth to the game. So, what am I doing? Am I going to make it linear like the original Castlevania 3, Castlevania 1? No, that's a little outdated. Am I going to leave it completely open-ended as Symphony of the Night, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance? No, that's a little outdated too. So what's the solution? Combine them both. Set up a mission system. Similar to how, and I keep using Devil May Cry, but I think that's one of the best games out there that is a perfect example here for what I'm trying to do. They have a mission system in that game where you can revisit any stage in the game, but at the same time there's a scoring system in place. You can go back and you can keep playing the same stage over and over until you get an S rank, and you can keep looking for everything, and you have a way to gauge how much you found in each stage and how you're doing overall. At the same time, with the way the game is set up, you can also come back with new abilities, but there are still certain limitations in place, so you can't just power through every single one of those old stages. It's really set up well, and at the same time the fun factor isn't affected because you can always come back and use those abilities to find new items, and that's a big part of the Metroidvania format, knowing that you can go back with abilities you once didn't have and find new interesting stuff that you didn't know about on your first playthrough, and it just makes the game that much more exciting. So, I hope that answers that question. I could go into more details here, but I have to flesh out a lot of this because there have to be controls in place that allow you to do scoring. There have to be controls in place for scoring purposes, but we also want to make sure that the fun factor isn't damaged in the process. Case in point, boss fights. I don't really want to make it so you're going to play through a stage and be able to fight a boss an unlimited number of times. It takes something away from the difficulty level of the game when you can fight a boss as many times as you want and grind on it over and over until the boss fight becomes such a joke that on significant playthroughs there's no threat. The thrill of fighting that boss and the nervousness you get of potentially losing and having to go through part of the stage over again are just gone. So I'm thinking of making boss fights just a single time thing. If you want to fight a boss again, you'll have to restart the game. And how I'm going to do that when it comes to scoring is set up that as soon as you're locked in the boss's room, the time stops, the damage counter stops, all that stuff stops until you beat the boss. Now, there is going to be an incentive to do better on the bosses, and that would be something I've mentioned in a previous video, and that would be medals. The better you do on a boss, the more medals you're going to get for beating them. And medals can be used, as I said in the previous video about the Master Librarian, to get things that are extra items in the game, ways to customize the game, adjust difficulty, new features. Just new little things, fun things to play around with that'll maybe make your gaming experience a little more creative and unique. But I covered that in the last video, so I'm not really going to talk about that much more here. So that's all I have to say when it comes to talking about how the actual stages are going to be laid out. So for those of you who are hardcore Symphony of the Night fans, don't worry, you'll still be able to explore the castle. You just won't have to be walking all the way back for 10 minutes from one point to another. You can instead just go to a level select screen, pick the stage you want to go to, and okay, I want to go to stage 3. Oh, okay, well, that's the castle entrance. Okay, so you just warp right there. When it comes to certain stages outside of the castle, like the first 2 stages I have planned, which would be the graveyard/town and then the bridge/forest, you will eventually be able to, you can always go back to them from the stage select screen. But eventually, the castle will open up. At the moment, it's set up to be done after Richter is beaten. Once you can get onto the second castle, there are actually stages planned to be outside of the castle that you're going to have to go back to before you could actually enter the reverse castle and take on Shaft and Dracula. And that's part of the Castlevania countryside, so I wanted to elaborate on that as well because I wanted to have a map just like in Castlevania 3 and in Super Castlevania. I thought that was really neat. I didn't just want it to be the castle. At that point, the castle gate would open and you could always traverse right out of the front door. Who knows what'll be waiting for you outside of there. But that's something I'll touch on at a way later date because it's just not something I'm really concerned about right now. So, what's next on the agenda? Let's talk about character physics. In short, in Symphony of the Night, the characters' physics were very floaty. And by floaty, I mean you had a lot of airtime. when you jumped up as Richter or Alucard, you had a significant amount of time in the air, both rising up and falling downward. And it just took away a lot of the challenge away from dodging attacks that were going on the ground, because you could literally walk across the room and jump over almost an entire screen's length very easily. And this allowed you to just dodge way too much stuff, and it made the game way too easy. I just didn't like the way it felt. It felt too unnatural. At the same time, I didn't want things to be as stiff as in Castlevania 1, where you walk off the edge, or Castlevania 3, or Simon's Quest, where you walk off the edge of a platform and drop faster than the speed of fucking light and sound combined. I didn't like that either. I think Rondo of Blood had a good combination here. You weren't in the air for very long, but it was long enough that you could actually move around and have some kind of air combat going. So those are the types of physics I've set up for Symphony of the Night. The character falls, jumps up in the air, and falls down at about the same speed as Rondo of Blood. Now, mind you, while your jumping speed has been increased so you have less air time with it, your maneuverability in the air overall is much, much better. I mean, you can easily do a single jump up, do a 3-hit air chain attack, and cancel that with the double jump, and do a chopping move, cancel that with an air rush, and then quickly stomp down out of the air. Overall, you just have much more offensive and defensive options that once again allow me to have much faster gameplay. And speaking of horizontal maneuverability, for those who don't know, Alucard now has a dash, and it's a significant speed increase over his walk in the original game, as you can see. The Wolf's movement is much less stiff now. He moves just like Alucard does. It's much easier to land on platforms. The dash isn't an immediate start thing, and he does have a quicker type of dash that if you dash long enough, you'll start speeding up to a certain point and start glowing and can tear through things. And there's actually several implementations planned to use this, but I'm not going to go into them now because I don't want to spoil them. As for the bat form, he moves at the same speed as Alucard does, 1.75 pixels, in the air or on the ground. He doesn't stay in the air constantly anymore. You have to tap the jump button to keep him airborne. But this is something that I did because I wanted to make it so that you were not just holding a control pad, maneuvering around slowly with the bat around the screen. No, I wanted it to feel like a small flying animal. I wanted it to feel like something that was affected by gravity and required a bit more skill to use versus just a control pad. Now you have to maneuver around, keep tapping the jump button to get between objects, like let's say spike traps or saw blades or projectiles or enemies or whatever I decide to throw at you. In fact, there's one particular stage planned right when you get, and this is actually the Darkwing Bat stage. It's actually called the Sky Walkway, and it leads into the Reverse Castle. It's actually a stage that you have to get through to get to the Reverse Castle. And it's actually a stage that once you get to the Reverse Castle entrance is when you discover you have to get Dracula's organs, and that's when the Castlevania map opens up. And oh look, there's several more stages to do. There's a cursed prison that I have to take care of, or there's a mansion on the outskirts with the cursed garden in it, or there's the muddy tombs over here. Oh look, there's a skeleton cavern. You see, there's more stages, and that leads into what I talked about earlier, the map opening up as well. But I'm digressing again here because I'm just getting excited talking about this stuff. So let's get back on subject. The bat's movement is much quicker and more fluid now, but it takes a bit more skill to use him. Now you can still use the Bat Echo, and Bat Fire will still stop you in the air if you're about to collide into something, but Bat Fireballs aren't something you can just spam repeatedly, or the Bat Echo would be of course useless. So the Bat's movement on the ground is simple. He can do everything he can do in the air basically. His movement is the same as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, and he has his own animation now for those of you who hadn't noticed it before. Let's talk about the Wolf a little bit more. He does have all the abilities that Alucard has movement-wise, except grabbing the edge of platforms. He's not able to do that, and I'm not planning on implementing that because the Wolf is a much more dangerous opponent when it comes to DPS. He has his simple bite attack and his kicking attack along with his rune sword attack, and he does more damage overall than Alucard does, but the trade-off is you have a lot less options, and most of that DPS is done from the bite, which has significantly less range than the sword, spears, etc. So there's your trade-off there. And movement-wise, though, he does have a slide, he does have an air rush, he does have a double jump. Landing on platforms is a lot easier now, etc, etc. He comes to a complete halt when you let go of the pad. Dashing, that's a different story. You know, he still has a slight, just like Richter's dash, he has a slight stop to it. Alucard has the same stop, so does the Wolf form. The hyperspeed dash has significantly more stop, but originally I actually had the dash set up similar to Super Metroid, in that you keep holding the controller forward, and if you have enough room you start dashing really quickly, but I just didn't like that. That felt so different from what we were all used to, double tapping forward to dash, so I left that in. So horizontal movement speed is overall greater, and this allows the game to be much more faster paced. It allows me to throw a lot more enemies at you. It allows combat to be a lot more fluid, a lot more exciting. I mean, the fact that you can now drop out of the air by holding just down and jump and stomp out of the air in both wolf form and Alucard form. Can't do that in bat form for obvious reasons. You know, he's a bat, he's got wings, you know, he's drifting through the air, different story. The fact that you can now slide through small passages or under projectiles because your hitbox is a lot smaller, the fact that you can now dash in those forms, you know, the trade-off for the bat form, it doesn't have a dash of any kind. You know, that is one trade-off of it, because the bat form just gave you too much power before. Offensively, it was weak, but you could use it to dodge anything. Well, the bat form rather has no dash. It does have a wing smash, but that at the moment is a limited use move. You can't just use it over and over to go through a room quicker, or it would make the bat too overpowered, just movement wise. So there are plus and minuses to each form. I haven't talked about Mist form yet, but Mist form is now mostly a dodging move. The mobility is very limited. It's much, much, much slower than it was before. It's something that has limited use too, but again, not designed for mobility. It's designed to evade attacks. It's not designed to be something you could spam over and over and over ad infinitum. So overall movement, much faster. I personally enjoy it a lot more. I think it makes the game a lot more exciting with the climbing, you know, the ability to hang from the ceiling and all the other extra little touches I put in. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, I put up a couple of clips here, but feel free to go back and look at my Christmas video because I give a lot of details there. So that's all I want to talk about this vid. Again, I want to thank all of my loyal Patreon subscribers. Without your donations, this project still wouldn't be alive. This video wouldn't have been made. This series wouldn't have been created. You guys really motivates me. As that number goes up more and more, it motivates me to put in more and more of my free time to work on this. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed to my Patreon yet, don't be a cheap motherfucker. Go join up. Links are down below, or you can make a one-time donation via PayPal. I also have a link to the forum and the Facebook group if you want to talk to any other Castlevania fans about this project. Like this video, comment down below. To all my Patreon subscriber and PayPal donators, feel free to outreach me with any video ideas you have, questions, comments, etc. And I'll talk to y'all later. Deuces mi gente, and thanks again for all the support.